Yo guys, here is a specific Yasuo guide. This will not be about builds and mechanics and whatnot. This will be about mainly like mental blockages that beginner players will face, as if why can't I hit a Yasuo Q, why do I cancel my basic attack so often, how come I cannot connect a tornado, why am I not using my wind wall properly. This will a lot be about rather the psyche on how to play around the enemy champion instead of like hula, animation, cancel, flash, mechanic, whatever, right? Now, let's get down to basics of why you're cancelling basic attacks and how to solve the issue. For example, one way of cancelling basic attacks is not understanding the attack speed of your champion, because you play lethal tempo. Now and then your attack speed will be lesser or more depending on your lethal tempo stacks, right? And so the more attack speed you have, the more movement you'll be able to have in between your basic attacks, right? But the thing is, some people overestimate that attack speed per movement time. For example, if you basic attack and you think you can instantly move, that may not always apply, because if you click away way too quickly as I did there, then you will cancel it. So you also gotta like get used to the extra attack speed value that you get from items and from lethal tempo plus per level. So it's less likely you're gonna choke on your basics, which will actually come with experience as well. Now, another way that people generally tend to cancel their basic attacks, beside like basicing and clicking away very quickly, is that they actually want to basic anti, right? Now, if you have a low amount of attack speed, it's very easy to actually like cancel your own basic attack, right? It has to be at the beginning of the wind up, right? If you cancel it at the beginning of the wind up, then it will not go through, but if at least it's middle way through the basic attack, then it will go through. So it's kind of weird, because like the basic will go through if you E exactly not at the beginning of your like sword swing, but around like this is very quick, right? Like the way Yasuo basic attacks is very quick, but at the exact beginning you cannot do it. But the more attack speed you have, the more likely you'll be able to actually just basic attack and instantly E, which will actually be determined by your attack speed on how likely can you just like basic and instantly E. For example, in here we have shit ton of attack speed, right? And at this point it's very hard. It's almost like I'm scripting, but your basic attack barely gets cancelled by your E, because it's so quick, right? So even if I try my hardest at this point, it's very difficult actually for you to sort of choke on your basic attack. Even if I try my hardest, it's very hard. So you have to understand, with attack speed, smoother E usages will be more valid, you know, because you will not be able to cancel those basics, right? Now, let's move on to some other things as well, such as why do you cancel, like there is one more thing before I forget on why do you cancel your basic. Sometimes people cancel their basics because they are rushing their Q, and so it so can happen that you will actually cancel your basic attack just because you use your Q. So your Q will actually cancel your basic, and that's something you also have to learn, when can you like instantly Q and when it's a more of a delayed Q. For example, in here I can almost instantly Q, right? Because lethal tempo is stacked up. So this comes with experience, but in here I can see, but sometimes it does get cancelled. So you can almost instantly Q, but it's not quite instant, and this will come with experience as well. So at most we got it on how to not choke on your basics. You can also cancel your basic attack with your W, just an extra thing. You can also cancel it with your ultimate, but this is like a rare case scenario. I mean, it's a rare case scenario where you choke on your basics. You cancel your basics because you are, but just saying that's definitely possible, I believe. But let's move on to some other things on why you are not hitting those Qs. You have to understand that your Q works differently based on how much attack speed you have, which always gets manipulated by lethal tempo and some other attack speed sources. For example, if we go really quick to Yasuo's fandom, right? Yasuo fandom, we'll be able to see that his cast time of his Q, I believe, will actually differ based on the attack speed you have. So at the beginning it will be 0.35, which is way more sidesteppable, and it will go down to 175, right? So the more attack speed you have, the more likely you'll be able to connect that Q more consistently, while also the cooldown will go progressively down and down. Now, for example, if you have a lower amount of attack speed, this will be less consistent, you know. So the most consistent your Q will be when you have that 133 benchmark of extra attack speed, which we have already. We are above it, right? So we can see the Q is way faster, right? And so when you have a lower amount of attack speed earlier on, people will more likely sidestep your abilities, as if I have like this amount of attack speed, right? This is way more delayed, right? It's way more sidesteppable. So you will not be able to dash through a minion into a Q, because this Q is generally more delayed than the one when your attack speed is maxed out. So just saying, that's very important to watch out for in the early levels. And I'll show you guys really quickly on how to play around such type of things. So for example, we don't have insane amount of attack speed and our Q is not casting as fast as possible, right? Let me show you guys how to proceed in this type of situation. So, oh wait, I spawned them and then I despawned them. Let me remove this dummy or place it in a better spot, right? So often when you play Yasuo, the enemy champion will position in a certain way where you cannot actually connect your Q because it's a range champ, but often you will try to do something like this, right? You will actually aim to EQ and bounce your EQ off that to AoE the enemy champion. Now that's one way of like AoEing the enemy champion with your EQ, but often you don't want to EQ, perhaps you don't want to overpush the wave. Then the better thing to do is to actually into a minion, wait or predict, right? Wait or predict. The reason behind that is very simple. As soon as you use your E, almost like a defense mechanism, we can call it that way, triggers in the enemy player's brain, which means that this guy is in, and after he uses his E, he will use his Q. So for example, more than often this is like a pattern thing that Yasuo players do. But as soon as you E, they instantly sidestep, right? And that's very important to watch out for, because like as soon as you cast this, the enemy champion will not be here. The enemy champion will walk a little bit more sideways, right? The enemy champion will be actually here, because they instantly react to your dash with a sidestep. So one thing you have to understand, you can get into type of situations. A, you could predict that Q, or B scenario, of course, if you have like enough attack speed, it will be smoother to just connect the plain Q. But if you don't have enough attack speed, then you will not be able to connect the plain Q. And in that case situation, I would recommend you guys to either wait and find a more accurate angle to Q, right? Or predict as I did, right? You click a little bit sideways, it depends. If you are in a more of a hurry, you may have to predict, depends. But I more often recommend you guys to just simply E in and wait for a Q. Don't instantly Q, because they will sidestep either to the left or to the right, and that's why often you're not connecting those Qs, because you are rushing them and you're expecting the enemy champion to not move in any type of direction, because a lot of players did actually come off MMOs where, let's say, some boss is playing a very patterned way that you need to like dash away from a certain ability, then you can fight the boss again or whatnot, and they don't quite treat League players as they are also like some type of real humans that will play reactively to what happens, right? They think that some Yasuo players do think that people play in a certain pattern, and if you play around it, then you'll be able to just automatically outplay everyone, but that may not apply to every player, that they play in a very, very patterned way. So that's one thing to understand. Some other things that are also very important to understand about Yasuo is your Q. Often rushing your Q instantly may not be the best idea unless you are guessing. From the other hand, what you'll have to understand that usually EQ is more consistent at connecting your knockup, right? But one thing you can do, there will be many dashing champions that you'll face in mid lane, such as Fizz, such as many other champions, and as soon as you try to EQ in, they will dash away. Or perhaps on top lane there will be some champs like Fiora and whatnot, right? And so against those type of champs you can also bluff, you can dash in, wait out that defensive ability, and you'll be able to connect your Q, right? Because it really comes down to what is the opponent thinking about. The opponent is often thinking about a possibility of a you know, EQ knockup, right? And so that's what you have to play around it. It's called bluffing, right? So this video is all about the psyche of the enemy player, on the way they are actually thinking, on the way they want to play around your champion. And so that's what you have to realize, because even in lower ranks, very easily, if you dash in with your tornado on a champion with a dash like LeBlanc or whatnot, the likeliness is very high that they will just dash away because they prefer to not be knocked up, right? And that's where like bluffing comes in play, right? Or even if you use your E aggressively, you may want to hold a little bit into your Q, because that fizz could Q through you, as an example. So that's what you have to really watch out on, right? Now some other things as well. I want to talk about why can't you get enough value on your W and your R. A lot it comes down to, like, people don't know exactly when to R, and so there is this Yasuo syndrome where Yasuo players R no matter what. So if you get this tornado and if you are no matter what, that's like a very bad sign. So do your best to actually be very calculated about your ultimates. For example, doing this every time you get the opportunity to R, it may not be the greatest idea, because often if you connect a single Q on your opponent, they're 100% HP, you're just gonna waste your ultimate, right? So that's one thing I want to talk about. You have to, like, actually more than often to go for more and more trades till you get to R in, otherwise you just waste your ultimate. So aim to actually go for some trades, or if you have follow-up, of course, like knock up someone, R them if a Diana is showing up, right, if you get ganked. But you gotta be a bit more calculated about, like, how do you use your ultimate, right? Because this is not about, like, as I said before, this is not about, like, EQ, you know, Indominion flashing on the enemy champion or pressing recall to get that double EQ bug abused. It's just really all about, like, decision takings on, like, when do you R in, right? And so that's what you have to be a little bit more and more calculated on. Just ask yourself some questions. Will this ultimate be useful? Do I waste my R? Because before you don't get any crit, your R doesn't hurt that hard actually. So you have to imagine you deal like 223 on the R. It provides some pen, but that's useless till you get critical strike, right? And it does not deal much damage. It does 223, which is actually under 223 because it's reduced by armor, so it's like something like 170, 180 usually, around that range. So that's basically a similar to a Q amount of damage, not too far from a Q amount of damage, right? So that's what you have to understand about your OR. That's very important. Now, some other things about your W to get maximum value out of it. Now, this is a high value ability, right? It has a long cooldown for a important reason, and so often people cannot really get enough value out of this ability because either they have zero reaction time, zero mind games, they don't know what to windwall, right? So it's important to know what to windwall and what not to windwall, right? Because some abilities barely deal any damage, or B scenario they're not windwallable, like a Azir's W, right? So you got to understand and you got to search up which abilities are actually windwallable. You'll face like one mage usually mid lane. Of course it will work against melee champs as well, like Zed and whatnot, and you have to type for example, you face Zed or, you know, whatever champion, Talon, you know. And one thing you have to understand is some abilities will be skill shots and some abilities will not be skill shots, right? And so you have to realize like what can you windwall and where will it be wasted. For example, Serap's Q and W is not a projectile. Non-projectile abilities will not be windwalled. So if you waste your W against, let's search up Serat. It's even a better example, right? Serat Phantom really quick, right? We go to his Phantom, right? We can see, what can we visually see, guys? Is it written it's a projectile? It's not written, it's not a projectile. It's not a projectile. Now if we scroll down, right? What will we find? Is it a projectile? How do you determine it's a projectile? Where is it written that it's a projectile, guys? Does anyone know? Because I'm really asking y'all because it's, for some reason it's not written that it's a projectile. Because in here I don't know either, but where is it written though? Edge range, the fuck is that even? Range. As like a projectile, disability cast for time, yeah. So it's supposed to write it's a projectile. In the past I remember it was written that it was a projectile, but for some random reason it's not written these days. Not sure exactly where was it written. Cast time none. Like in the past it was written in here somewhere. Where the hell was it written? I cannot find it with my eyes. Cast time, range, edit. This does not do much, right? Based on the distance. Where the hell was it written that it's a projectile? Only blast. You know what? Usually you can see it with your eyes, then fuck it. I'm trying to be a smartass in here, but I can't find it. I swear in the past it was written that it's a projectile-based ability. The fuck is this, man? I swear at the time it used to be there. But it's something you learn also with experience on what does Windwall work against and what doesn't. Because it's also written on the fandom itself that which abilities tend to be projectiles and which not, but for some reason I don't know, I just can't find it anymore. I guess we'll just say it comes with experience, and it just comes with experience that you'll have to constantly learn. Or is there like a specific way of knowing abilities? Okay, perfect. So most of the projectiles abilities will be here, and the non-projectile ones. Yeah, this is perfect. This is actually perfect. Good. So perfect. Alright, perfect. Projectile and non-projectile abilities will be okay, so you'll find most of them here at most, right, that are actually not windwallable, right? Okay, that's some information already. I swear it was written here, but it's whatever. Let's move on. So some things you have to learn, as I said, just by experience. You can see it with your eyes if you can windwall something or you can't. So that's something to watch out for and learn it step by step. The other thing about the windwall that's important to learn, it actually goes outwards, right? So it starts from your direction, but it goes outwards, right? So even if a champion would be very, very close to you, the windwall will be still efficient against. And so often to get the most value out of the windwall, both sides of the windwall will proc projectiles, even though it kinda looks like it only procs from the front. But it's weird because it also deflects projectiles from the side. That's just a extra little tip I want to give you guys. Okay, now let's move on to the E usage as well, because the E usage is also kind of a ability that changes actually step by step. So for example, at the beginning it will have a 0.5 cooldown, 0.4, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. So the more points you put in your E, that you generally tend to max after your you know, Q ability, you'll be able to dash more and more frequently, so there will be a feeling difference as well. So for example, dash, right? So you'll be able to almost instantly, if not instantly dash. I believe it's almost instant, right? It's almost instant, right? As if I would just reset the game, and you guys can see there's like a feeling difference if you would be, let's say, just like level 1 with 1 point in your even. It has a 0.5 cooldown, right? So the cooldown actually does decrease quite nicely. So that's what you have to like learn as well, on like what kind of difference allowances do you have, right? Because you can see how much more unsmooth your E is, right? So that's something to actually watch out for, because you'll have more outplay potential the more points you have in your E, because the faster you can get away from a Serra T if you don't have Invol, or Serra W, so whatever ability, right? So for example, if you play against an enemy, I don't say you should, you know, Emax or anything, but this is just a showcase. Once you put points in your E, for example, as soon as you dash into something, you can instantly dash back, which allows you to, let's say, perhaps outplay more easily any W, right? Or some other AoE abilities that may clip you. So you have to understand that you have way more mobility like this to gap close, right? And you also have like more dodge ability, which you should definitely use in your own strength, right? But this is also something you have to have experience with. So I can explain you guys as much as possible or on how this ability could work and how does it change per levels and per points, right? But you'll have to experience it out, right? Now another mental blockage I want to talk about on why you cannot actually hit your ultimate even though you did hit your wind ball. There will be some very short knockups in the game where you need to spam your R like Diana R and many other like knockup abilities that last a very short duration, Poppy, whatnot. That's where you need to spam the ability itself, you know. But there will be occasions where you lose vision on the enemy champion. So for example, if I stack my Q, I hit the dummy, I smash this R, I cannot R, right? Now you have to have vision For some reason Riot Games made it that way that you have to have vision. So if I Q, I ward, I can alright. So that's very important to understand. There is like another niche thing that I wanna just add to it. Generally speaking, when you see like we are in, you know, we arrive usually behind the enemy champion, usually. That's like a very generic thing. Unless you are very close to the tower, then you will appear in front of the enemy champion. It's intentionally made this way, so you will not take aggro early on. So if you get a kill opportunity and you're very close to the tower, your R will intentionally keep you outside of the tower's reach, so you don't actually get aggroed. So in case you get like a mental blockage that I don't want to R in because I'm gonna get tower aggroed, and I just gonna die if I get tower aggroed too early on in the fight, don't worry about that. In this case scenario, you will be able to actually like R in. So there's just like an extra I wanted to add to it. I believe that's it for now, guys. Have a nice day, and make sure to leave some type of comments in the comment section if you are willing to have some type of civil discussion. As I said, this is mainly for super beginners to understand why they are choking on basic attacks, abilities, why this and that doesn't work out, you know. So basically just explaining like step by step on like how these mechanics work on Yasuo, and how to like practice them, how to like have a proper understanding of these abilities. Yo guys, and there's a little bonus that I forgot about when it comes to E usage on why can't you actually properly E into the enemy champion, because often it will happen that the minions do aggro on you, or they move in a random direction to aggro one of your minions, and you will not get a straight forward path to engage on top of your opponent, right? And so one thing I want to explain to you guys, you got to reposition at least a teensy bit sometimes to engage on your opponent. So just look at the minions positioning and your own positioning, right? So for example, if I stay in a straight line, most likely I'm gonna dash in a straight line as well. But sometimes when you aggro the enemy champions, most of the minions will aggro on top of you and you will not get the best engage opportunity, right? So for example, I would like to go in, right? But I have two options, right? So I could dash like this. I will most likely end up in this direction, right? I could dash on this minion, and so if my opponent actually disengages downwards, this will be a better dash angle. So the dash angles from the minions, that's one thing you have to understand. Now the other very important thing that you have to understand is to reposition, because the minions tend to like be more than often in a very random direction, which means that you need to also, for example, I don't know, if I wanna like get on top of the enemy champion or something, right? And so often the minions may be all over the place like this, you know, it could be any position, right? For example, if I would like to engage on my opponent, right? There's like a minion here. Oh fuck, there's a minion here, for example, my opponent is here. You don't always get straight up the best dash angles depending on your position. Sometimes you need to reposition. For example, often you'll catch yourself in situations like this, you know, where you dash in but you don't get enough distance towards the enemy champion. And I know this sounds straightforward for most of the better Yasuo players, but for those that are beginners, you have to understand your best dashing positions, right? So this is like something you could also get a mental blockage from if you're kind of a beginner. So that's what I would advise, to reposition. Especially in here, like if you wanna like get on top of the enemy champion, you could eat them, which is fine if they are in range. If they are not in range, depends how they walk, you know, depends how they position, and depending on that, you'll be able to engage on them. For example, if my opponent would be here, then you position like this, and you will arrive on the right side, right? But if my opponent is here, then this positioning may be bad, and you wanna like E like this, right? So where you position from, that matters more, right, than the minions positioning, right? That's like something as an extra I wanted to add to the video, because this is something that people could choke on. That's it for now, guys. Have a nice day.